Hi guys, I'm Joe and this is a cool dry place. So this is the fence that we are going to modify and install to fit our bandsaw table. So let's get on it. So if you were a keen viewer of the second part of this series, you will have noticed that there was a issue I was having over here when I was tracing the cast iron table onto the wood from the underside, that I couldn't see one of my reference marks here. And you might have said to yourself, well, that's going to bite him in the butt later if he doesn't notice it now. And you're right, it is potentially biting me in the butt now. Because one of the first things I did after getting this installed was kind of held the fence up in here just to kind of look at it, examine it, and see how it is that we have to go about modifying it to install it to the table. And then the second thing I did was brought over a framing square, undisputably square, and slipped it into the miter slot and realized, shoot, we are not square. And of course I checked a couple other squares too to make sure. But yeah, we would have to remove some material on this side over here. I don't know exactly how much. Not enough that I would use machinery. I would use a hand plane for this. So what would we have to do? We would have to take this table off, unscrew it, take it off, take half a dozen swipes with the hand plane, bring it back over here again, install it, and check it out, because the only way to see if we're square to this miter slot is to actually reinstall it back into the table again so we can get that reference that we need to get. And repeat that, half a dozen times or something like that. And then check our radius and remachine that if necessary. Probably isn't, probably would just have to hand sand it, but then refinish it. That's going to set us back a little while. And I started to ask myself, well, shoot, how important is that? This is my third bandsaw, and this is the only bandsaw I've ever had that actually had a miter slot and had not only did it have a fence, but it had provisions to mount a fence. It had a milled surface on 4 edges of the table. It had holes in there to be able to put screws or bolts into. The other bandsaws I had before, they certainly didn't have a miter slot, and I don't think they had any kind of holes drilled on the perimeter of the table to be able to put a fence on. They just weren't thinking about that stuff. You clamped a fence on. That's what you did, and that's what I did. I would clamp a fence onto the surface of the table when I needed to have a fence, which wasn't that often, but it was often enough that I'm going to be very happy this bandsaw has a fence. So I was like, geez, that's a lot of work to do all this stuff. And honestly, with the miter slot, I can't think of a single thing that I would do with this miter slot that would really matter. Like, what I mean is, like, the only thing I can think of that I would probably want to build is that circle cutting jig. But that's a circle, right? That doesn't need to be flat or square. And if I don't think I would ever cut wood to length on a bandsaw, but if I did, I wouldn't be expecting it to be the final length. It's probably just going to be a rough length, like cutting dowels or something like that are going to be flushed up with the surface with a hand plane later or sandpaper. Well, what about ripping? Yeah, I don't ever rip anything on the bandsaw that I would expect to be the final surface. When I do shop veneers, for example, on the bandsaw, I'm always going to treat at least one, but probably both sides of those shop sawn veneers. So how crucial is it? I can't imagine a fraction of a degree off from our miter slot is going to pinch the blade. That just doesn't happen. Or throw it off or whatever. And hey, as far as that goes, how do I know that this miter slot is right to the blade? My wheels are crowned like most bandsaws are, and there's a whole bunch of, and I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole, you folks. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can set your bandsaw up. Do you ride the blade on the top of the gullet or on the top of the crown? Do you ride it in the back or the front, whatever? I'm not going down that. You could there's tons and tons of videos on how to set your bandsaw up for the new blade. And I watched a few of them, and I've probably watched a whole lot more in the past, but the few that I watched just prior to coming down here and doing this, none of them really talked about setting your fence up to the blade and how do you go about it. The one that I did see that was kind of the jankiest, he held his the beam from his combination square up here and got it on the beam of the blade here. He's like, yep, okay, and now put your fence up to that. I'm not buying that. That doesn't work out for me. You know, with a table saw, it's a whole lot simpler because you have a lot of blade that can be coming up out of that table. You can reference the front, you can reference the back of it. Here, there's just not enough blade to be able to reference anything. So, I'm going to install this fence. I'm going to go ahead and modify the rails. I'm going to go ahead and install this fence. And I guess if this becomes an issue that it's slightly out of square, I'll correct it in the future. But unless if I'm just not seeing something, and there's a good chance I'm not, then I'm going to go ahead and do what I just said. You know, down in the comments, leave something down there. You know, how do you guys use your miter slot on a bandsaw? How do you guys use your fence on a bandsaw? Do you expect hyper accurate results on that? Or are you still going to be doing some machining? Are you still going to be doing some hand tool work to that workpiece when you've taken it off of this saw? Because for the life of me, I just don't think that the steps I take now, the 2-3 days, it's mostly the finish, of delay here, is going to put me on a better foot. So I'm going to go ahead and modify the bandsaw fence and put it on here, and hopefully it'll be right. Now, some things that are crucial, okay, this blade is dialed in to be 90 degrees to the table. And we will dial in the fence. I'm not that worried about it at this point, but we will dial in the fence to be parallel to the blade, or 90 degrees also to the table, because that will be crucial when we're doing shops on veneers. I want to make sure the top part is the same thickness as the bottom part, or really darn close anyway, because I think that might be bad if it was too far out. And I do intend to do some ripping on here. You know, the table saw isn't crazy powerful, so I do intend to do some ripping of some lumber on here before it gets to final dimensions maybe on the table saw. So let me know in the comments, is installing this knowing that it's not quite square really that crucial? And point me and some of the other folks to, the miter slot, how do you even begin to line this miter slot up to is that even 1/2 inch? It's just under, we'll call it 1/2 inch, but I think it's just under, from the gullet to the back of the blade here. How do I line up my 14 inches to here? When this does flex, and depending upon where you have it on the wheels, I guess I'm just not making the connection. So hopefully I'm not doing something I can't come back from. Let's install this fence. Enough chit chat. I put the fence and the front rail up here so we could kind of get a look at this together and get an idea of what we need to do. It's not screwed down right now. And I have this fence, there's a marker on it, and I have it dialed into 10. There's some etched markings on the top of this rail that go from 1 inch to 24 inches over here. And the 0 then would be right about here. We can't use the 0 on this rail. So what I was thinking was, can we use 10 as our 0? And it'll be a little bit easier. You want to come up here and do a quick rip at 3 inches, to just set it at 7. And it should be somewhat easy to do. Right now, the fence is 5/8 of an inch away from the blade, and that's good. I think I'm going to install a sacrificial wood fence on top of this, and that will be anywhere from 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick, so that's cool. So I think that's what we're going to do, is I put this up here so we can get an idea where we're going to cut this metal rail. So I think we'll put some marks here. I want it to be just outside, just on the flat, on the front here, and exactly where the flat returns over here onto the front edge. I don't want to have any part of that metal rail sticking out past the wood. The back, same way, but it's not as crucial. You see there's an overlap here, or sorry, the head of the fence here probably extends another 2.5 inches or thereabouts on each side of the actual fence itself. So the back rail, we could cut quite a little bit shorter than the front rail and not have it interfere with anything else back there. One other thing else to note too is that these bolts, if you loosen these bolts up, you can kind of swing this fence just a little bit. Not a whole lot, but we can maybe account for a little bit of our unsquaredness or for the drift that there might be in one bandsaw blade to the next bandsaw, or how you mount the blade on the wheels or whatever. So let's get some blue tape, put it down here, and make some marks so we know where to cut this front metal rail. Okay, I'm going to put some blue tape right about there. And we're going to put some right over in here. All right, with our blue tape in place, I'm going to put a couple marks, one mark here, right about here. I guess this doesn't have to be super accurate, but I just want it to be on the flat of our leading edge here of the bandsaw table. And I'm going to do one right about here. Actually, I'm going to come in a little bit from that mark. Now I want to check something though. Let me get a couple clamps. What I would like to do is check to see how far we can travel our fence over. I'm trying to mess up with my tape, isn't it? Well, I guess I can remark this. How far we can travel our fence over. Oh, that's great. And stay on the rail. So that's perfect. Okay. Let's pretend that didn't happen. You might not be able to see it, but I put a mark on either side, left and right, of where we want to cut this rail. So let's get this off of here and get it cut. Have this front rail clamped up into the vise, hopefully in a way that is not distorting it at all. And I transferred the mark, is right here, I kind of transferred onto some other blue tape that was the back side of this, so that hopefully I can see it a little bit better while we're cutting it. So, fingers crossed. All right, guys, hope this works. All right, let's clean up our ends a little bit and then see how it works on the bandsaw. All right, we got that cut down, the front rail, and I took a file and kind of rounded off the edges a little bit so there's no burrs or anything like that. They're a little bit smoother and more kindly. And right now the fence is set to be about 9/16. Yep, 9/16 off of the blade, which is good. We have it 0 at 10. So I don't see any reason why this will be a problem here. I think what we'll do now is cut the back rail to be just the same length as this. I don't see a reason why it couldn't be. It could be a little bit shorter if you wanted to cut it shorter, but I don't think I'm going to. I think I'm just going to cut it the same length as the front rail. And then we'll figure out our screws. I want to get at least 4 in here, but ideally 6 for each front and back. But let's see what we have, and then and what size we got to cut those holes to. But first, back rail. We've cut the ends off of the back rail. This is the one that doesn't have that sort of rack and pinion gear thing in it. And cleaned up the ends so they're nice and smooth. Went ahead and marked on the front rail here where we're going to put 5 screws. So I've marked those, and I've already center punched them too. Was able to find out of the junk drawer about 11 screws that look like they still have a decent head on them. Some of them look a little, I probably should throw them away. But we're going to go ahead and get this drilled out, and then we'll use this as the template to do the back rail. The front and back bars are now countersunk for the screws we're going to use, and I took a file and got rid of the burrs on the front and kind of inside in here too. This was sort of squirrely here, trying to get a file in there. I got my fingers on these teeth here a couple of times. The countersunk bit was a little bit weird too. I had to slide it in like that because it wouldn't go in for the screw holes just this way. I had to slide it in from the end here. A little bit weird. So let's see here. Now we got to go mount this sucker on the table. Brought the fence over here along with the front rail so we get an idea of how we're going to install it, where the screws need to be at in relation to the table here. So one thing I noticed, this fence is a little bit different than, say, a bees miter or a Delta Unifence, where it actually rides on the front and back rails. The fence actually does not touch the surface of the table, whether it's a table saw or a bandsaw. It actually floats just right over the top of it. A little different from, say, a bees miter or from a Delta Unifence, where that one they have that pad out here, so it will kind of it engages on the top surface of the table, whatever it is, and will move along. And that said, one thing I noticed is that when I brought this over here, with the rail actually just kind of hanging off the fence, there's a little bit of, not much, but there's a little bit of slop up and down in this system here. So we want to make sure it's actually I guess the head part of this fence, I don't know what this is called, but that this actually is touching the rail on the top surface, not the bottom surface. So I'm going to bring this up and just set the rail so it's just on the edge of the table here. And then zero our pointer in at 10, and then carefully kind of clamp down the fence so it's clamped onto the rail, and then slide this back into our relative position about where we want it. I'm going to use a couple pieces of cardboard. This is just from a oatmeal box, cereal box will do. And I'm just going to slide it underneath here in the front and back. That way we have just a little bit of a gap between the fence and the table. Not a lot, but a little bit. And then let's zero in our fence relative to the blade. That's actually not bad. But we're going to use, like I say, about a 9/16 inch. This doesn't have to be perfect because we can alter the pointer just a little bit on the fence so we get the to zero it in. But that's pretty good. Now I think what I'd like to do is work from the left to the right. And what I'm going to do there is to get actually, first is first. Let's do this. This should be about a 1/2 inch. Should be about a 1/2 inch from the surface of the table to the top surface of the rail, but it might not be exactly. And I don't particularly care, just so long as it doesn't obstruct our miter gauge, and I don't believe it will, our miter gauge slot. So I'm going to use a combination square, loosen up the beam on it so it will travel back and forth. And I want to set it on this side to kind of capture whatever that measurement is, the difference from the surface of the table to the surface of the front rail here, locking it down, move it over to the same place over here on the back side, and make sure that that's pretty good, that that's the same. So we've kind of captured that in memory here. So let's grab a clamp. I want to clamp across here to clamp the front rail in place so that it doesn't move around on us. Slide that up. I'm not snugging it yet. So just before we're going to snug this up, I want to take my combination square with that measurement locked in and make sure that this far end here, the far right side, is where it should be for this whole thing to work. Just tightening up the clamp a little bit. You don't gotta have to go gorilla strength here, just enough so that it doesn't move around. That should be good. Now, what I'd like to do is move this fence and the cereal box pieces over a little bit so we could kind of get this side kind of dialed in, height-wise, make sure it's dialed in. So we got to loosen up our fence. The rail should stay where it's at. I'm going to slowly, gently move this over to right about here. Kind of moving about as far as I can and still staying on the table. So there is a screw hole right here to mount, but we're not going to be able to get to it because the head of this fence is just partially blocking that. But there should also be a screw hole. There's a screw hole right about here. So let's actually move it over just a scotch more. That should be all right. Yep, we can get to that screw, and I'm going to just make sure that this can we still get to it? Because I want to actually, I'm going to bring it back just a hair. Okay, we can still get to that screw out. All right, I want to make sure that, again, the fence, the head of this fence is actually riding on the top surface of this rail. So let's just make sure it is. Just press it up into the fence a little bit. You know what? Let's get a clamp on this. Probably isn't really necessary, but it will help to, I guess it'll just give me a little more confidence that the fence isn't moving around when I'm putting some up pressure on this rail to make sure that it's bearing on the surfaces of the fence head here. I'm going to tighten that down, tighten the fence down so it's kind of locked in position. That screw hole is right about here. So let's get another clamp to go front to back here. Again, it doesn't have to be gorilla strength. Using the countersink bit that we used for the rail to countersink the fasteners there, I'm going to use this to also locate, and how are we going to get it in there? The holes, oh, that will slide in there. Okay, if we're very careful, it will slide in the front rail here. To sort of locate the holes that we need to drill for the front rail. Shoot. This may not work. Yeah, I'm just hitting this edge of the fence here. Darn it. Well, let's see if we can move this fence just a little bit more to the left here, get it out of my way. The rail probably shouldn't be moving because it's clamped, right? Let's scooch it over just a hair. Is that enough room now? Now that should be plenty of room. Okay, tighten down the fence again to the rail. It shouldn't have moved, but I mean the rail shouldn't have moved. We probably should be fine. I can't really see over here on this side, unfortunately, but from what I can see, I don't see a gap. Now we should be able to use the center, I'm sorry, countersink bit to sort of locate where our holes need to be. And I know this isn't going to be perfect, but it should give us the dimple that we're looking for to be able to get the drill bit in there to drill some pilot holes. My feeling is that even though the hole is much bigger than the point of this countersink bit, is that once it gets down into the metal, the wood will, it's not as strong as the metal. So once it will center on that sort of countersink that we've made in there, hopefully. All right, let's change that out and actually get the drill bit in here. I have a 1/8 inch drill bit, the same as the shank on the screws we're going to use. Okay. Now, because these are hardwood, I would like to put a little bit of paraffin wax on the threads just to make sure that it goes in good and doesn't split. This stuff is great. You guys should get some paraffin wax. You can pick up at the grocery store, and it will last for just about ever. Don't want to strip it out, so go slow. All right, that's good, I hope. Let's undo this one. Well, that was not that tight. Hope that this is okay. Let's undo this. And slide the fence over to here, which means we might have to kind of take it apart a little bit. How do we do here with... Dang it, it's actually on the table a little bit. Hi, I wanted to be up a little bit higher than that. I mean, it's good here, but you know what might have to happen is I believe this whole surface, like we kind of talked about, I forget which one it was in, but this is a little bit higher than the cast iron. So after we get a couple miles on this, we might end up addressing this here by planing it down a little bit, but it's because it's actually pretty good here when it comes to the cast iron part of the table. All right, well, what I have to do is I have to unscrew this in order to get it off, I believe. Yeah, I would have to unscrew this to be able to take it off. Let's take it over as far as we can before we do that. That might be a little bit easier. This is sort of the piece that it engages with on the inside. It's kind of neat. Just to give you a quick idea how that works. So this little piece here goes right down in here like so. Screws onto this big like 3/8 inch screw here, and then we'll clamp down on this very front U section of this rail. That's going to be tricky, because that... Oh, it is tightening down. Oh, great. I thought that little piece flopped over in the U channel. Okay, where are we at? Perfect. We are riding on the rail. Let's get our pieces of cardboard in here just to make sure that yeah, it looks like it's riding on the rail. Where is the clamp is covering up one of the screw holes, and the other screw hole is right where the miter slot is at in the wood. So let's see, maybe can this go? No, it cannot. Well, shoot, that's going to be tricky. I was hoping to not take this clamp off, but I think we're going to take this clamp off just to move the fence out over just a little bit more to the edge of the table. Now we should be able to have access to this screw hole over here. Let's see if we do it to this one. Maybe that's better. Let's do it to let's get this far one here. So let's put this thing right about here. I don't want to be in the miter slot. Before we clamp this on, I'm just checking to make sure I got clearance in here to yeah, I should have enough clearance, I think, to tightening up the fence to the rail. I'm going to move the clamp over so it is as far over to the fence as it can be. But I'm going to go with a little smaller clamp here. I should allow just a little more room to get to this fastener location right here. All right, let's drill our counter. Again, using the countersink bit that we used for the rails. All right, that should be good. Let's switch this out to a 1/8 inch drill bit. Again, a little wax. Just to make that go a little bit easier in the hardwood. I don't know if you noticed, but that's sort of it's weird how it made the front end of this, or back end, however you want to look at that, come up. That's very peculiar. crap, it's rubbing right here. This is not going out very well, guys. Not going very well. Thought this was going to be a heck of a lot easier. What am I doing wrong? Arg! I think what happened is when we clamped this in the vise to cut it off, we might have closed up this U a little bit. And so when, well, at least that's what I'm guessing, I don't really know, but when I clamp this down, see how the outboard side there raises up a little bit? Now, it's not a super huge big deal, because when you do tighten down this outboard clamp here, it will draw it down to the rear rail once we get that installed. But I would like to maybe not have that happen. I'd like to, I plan on using that outboard clamp all the time, probably just when I'm doing something intense like resawing. So I think what I'm gonna do is take my little Wonder Bar and kind of stick it in here. I'm hoping to not screw up the teeth on this sort of rack and pinion thing. There's teeth on the inside of this here. But I want to just sort of gently pry up on this U channel to see if I can get the top portion of it here to sort of bend back to where I think it should be. I don't know if this is the right thing or not to do, but it does seem to help. So that's clamped down and it's not raising that front end up anymore. That's good. I think that's what happened. I think when we put it in the vise, it just closed up that U just a little bit so that it would cause then that outboard side to raise up a little bit. All right, well, I got most of the fasteners in here, but I need to get a few more just to secure it. And let's get on that. Need to get out of here first. So you see, that's kind of how that works. There's a couple little pins sort of engaged in this. I think it's aluminum. I'm not sure what this casting is made out of. But it's kind of a neat little device. Kind of clever. Not nearly as handy as the Biesmeyer though, where you could just pick it up and take it right off. This is a little more of a pain in the butt when you want to move it from one side to the other side. But luckily it seems to, if you're kind of mindful where you place it in relation to that little thing in there, it seems to engage every time I've done it, and I've probably done it about half a dozen times or so now. So I already kind of corrected this side with the little pry bar trick, so it doesn't seem to raise up that outboard end there. All right, I think the front rail is dialed in pretty good. It needs a little bit of work, but I think just with the Wonder Bar there to kind of tune up the rail. Okay, we set that in our combination square, double check it. Now I want to come over here. This side is a lot higher than it ought to be installed at. But we're going to work from that side first. We're going to screw that end first. So what I want to do is take my clamp and sorry you can't really see this very well, but I'm moving the rail down. Really just with the combination square, so the rail should be set down about the same height that it is here. Although this probably changed just a little bit, but it shouldn't be that, I wouldn't think it would be that critical at this point. All right, tightened up the clamp just a little bit. Again, not gorilla strength, but just a little bit. Let's check that again. Yeah, a little bit of a gap there, but let's not worry about that right now. And just a little bit of a gap there, but Probably not much. All right, let's take the fence and kind of move it just about to the back here. That we should be able to shoot. My dryer vent might be in the way to get that last screw. So let's try to get this one in here. There should be a screw hole right about here. So I'm going to move this back. I'm going to move the fence over. Because that's flared out a little bit, I'm trying to get a room to put a clamp over here to draw in this back rail. But now that should be okay. All right, so let's see if we can get at least this one screw in here. I might have to move the bandsaw out from the wall a little bit or do something with my pipe here to be able to get that last screw over there. But we should be able to get the second to last. We can remove this, put it probably on the other side of the, remember it's covering up one hole right here, another hole should be right about where the miter slot's at. So let's just slide this off for right now. Put this yeah, I don't know if you can see it or not, but that's kind of peeled away from the side over here. There's definitely a little bent, but that's fine. Have our shim in location. Tighten up the front of this fence a little bit. And I'm going to tighten this up just a little bit so that rail is engaged at this bottom post of the fence here. I'm not going too much, just kind of taking the slop out of the mechanism. Now we'll tighten down the clamp to bring this back rail into place. Actually, I think what I'm going to do is scooch it over here a little bit, and we'll do this screw hole. Because it's closest to the clamp. All right, tighten that down. Check everything over. Let's bring this up so it's actually tight. Loosen this just a scotch, and then I'm going to retighten it just in case if anything slipped around when we tighten this up. All right, I got the bandsaw back in position again so it doesn't wobble. And guys, I am very stoked. I know there's some shortcomings with this. I know we probably have to plane this side of the wood extension table down and probably this side down too, just a little bit. But overall, I'm very, very stoked. And we might have to readdress the edge here too, like I kind of mentioned in the beginning of this video. But you know, the only thing I want to do at this point is get that sacrificial fence on and then use it. I want to just use this on a couple of projects, see what it's like, and see if there's some other changes that need to be made, and then take that all into account and maybe do that all at once, do like an update on this. But I am really stoked. This is going to make this bandsaw just a whole lot better, a whole lot more fun to use. You know, we took this table from being about a square foot to being almost 4 square feet. And we put a fence on here that was just sitting around, and it's going to be very useful. Be able to put this somewhere, have repeatable results, to lock it down in the front and the back. And this will take a lot of pressure. I mean, you can really put a lot of pressure on that fence without having things wiggle around. So what's next? Well, let's do let's cut something on it, right? That's not bad. I want you to see something though. All right, I'm going to cut about halfway through this board, and we'll come in here for a little closer inspection. All right, this is what I was noticing with that first cut that we did that I thought you guys would want to see. So I don't know if you can tell or not, but there's just a little bit of a gap. Look in the back of the blade here. There's just a little bit of a gap there. And over on this side, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there really isn't that much of a gap. Let's look at the back of the bandsaw here. It might be a little bit easier to see that way. Yeah, I think you can see there a little bit easier that the back of the blade of the bandsaw seems to be just about touching the kerf towards the fence. So ideally, I think what this is telling us is that the fence should maybe go this way on the back end of it a little bit, or correct the blade somehow. However, it's not really an issue either. So could also be telling us that don't worry about it and leave it the way it is. I'm not sure. Dudes, this is awesome. I mean, from increasing the work surface to adding a rock solid fence on here, it's gonna make this bandsaw a whole lot easier to use and a whole lot more fun to use. And use it as exactly what I wanna do. I wanna get a few projects, a few miles on this, and then address some other concerns that might creep up then. We've already identified a few things, but there'll probably be a few other ones too. Thank you so much for watching. Thumbs up, and if you don't wanna miss out on some other cool DIY stuff, subscribe down below. Thank you guys, appreciate it.